Hey, Keith, thanks for joining us today. As we're getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Brian, my pleasure. Excited to be here. So I am a career sales guy. I have been doing this thing since I have been employed, which is way back in the Stone Ages when I started work at 13, when labor laws were different. And my parents told me even starting at 13, you can have anything you want in the world if you buy it for yourself. And I loved that attitude. And I started working at 13 in straight retail. And I made my way to full commission sales starting at about age 18. And I've never done anything since. And
Was that the motivation when you were a kid that you wanted stuff and the
that
parents were
was it.
saying no?
Yep. And my parents are both in sales, and they wanted to instill that philosophy, which is the world is your oyster if you make it your oyster.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, you know what? That's actually quite reasonable. I like this idea.
Well, it was a super motive for me as well, because it was like, yeah, I want that jacket. I want to go
Oh,
skiing.
yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I went to a small private school here in Jersey, and it is one that has a bit of a reputation of people buying their way into because it's not the cheapest school on earth. But I went on almost a full academic ride,
Wow.
and I was working full time straight commission sales because I wanted a brand new $60,000 car. My parents, of course, said, "You're insane. You can have a used Honda Civic if you want us to buy you something. Otherwise, you're on your own." I said, fine, I'll be on my own. So here I am driving around in this rich kid school with everybody just falling right into the trap. And meanwhile, I'm leaving after class and saying, no, guys, I have to go work because I have to make my car payment.
Well, that correlation between effort and reward is key in sales.
Absolutely. And it's no bad thing, but I find this is one of the key interesting points of sales. And it's a motivating point that I come back to all the time with my AEs. We have one of the most interesting jobs in the world because we get to be selfishly unselfish. And if you do that properly, you are serving yourself and serving the needs of your company, but ultimately serving the needs of your client. And due to the challenge of this combination, we get well rewarded, but that does need to be subjugated to the needs of our client. It
Right.
can't come first.
And that's something that's very different about B2B is you don't trick or pressure somebody into buying an enterprise solution. You earn it.
Exactly. And the interesting part, though, of course, is that those old school cruddy B2C, I'm selling you a vacuum cleaner door to door traits have somehow managed to stay prevalent in B2B, and they pop up every so often. And it's miserable. You get the same cold calls I do, and half of them are stellar, and half of them you're saying, my God, can I please train you for 20 minutes?
Yeah. Can I give you some feedback? You almost had me.
That's it. That's your pitch.
And were you a natural or did it take an adjustment in your personality and your vantage point?
So I don't necessarily believe there's anything as a natural salesperson. I think there are tendencies that lend themselves to the career. And it's really interesting in that just we're evaluating in my gig some testing maybe for AEs and looking at doing this in a more formalized way. And I took it out of curiosity. And when you take one of these things at this point, when you've been doing it for a while, the answers are all pretty obvious, of course, and you score as 100 down the chart. That's learned behavior. Sure, some of these things, when they're looking at and they're saying optimism and how comfortable are you with people, sure. But even that is learned. There's no such thing as someone that comes from the womb saying that glass is half full. No, you learn this perspective and viewpoint.
But there are people who naturally tend to it. It's like the kid in the playground that naturally goes up and wants to share his toys,
It's true. I'm a
as
big
opposed
believer.
to the kid hitting the other kids with the toys.
True. I believe in nurture. I do. I will readily admit it. I'm a nurture guy all day. I think nature has very little to do with it. And I think I'll go off on a tangent, but I think in some ways, nature's a little bit of a defeatist mentality when you look at salespeople and they're like, I'm not cut out for this. No, you're choosing to not be cut out for this.
Because it is a hard living. It's if you look on the spectrum of easy to hard, it's pretty
It's
hard.
the hardest. And this is another topic that I love speaking about because what we do, and I know you speak about it all the time, what we do is sports. It is. And for me, that goes straight to baseball. And I'll admit I'm a big baseball guy. And normally I get to whine and complain about being a Mets fan. The past couple of days, I will cheer about being a Mets fan. But it is baseball. And what do baseball players do? An amazing baseball player bats what, 300?
Yeah.
That is professional failure. He fails twice as often as he succeeds. And that's what we do as salespeople. But yet, there's a mindfulness that is requisite here, which is this is the last ball I will ever get, and it is getting my all. And that is every single at bat we have in sales is that emotional labor needs to come on and says, okay, nothing else exists. I'm on. Doesn't matter that I've lost my past 75 pitches and I'm getting fired tomorrow. I'm on. And as far as this prospect is concerned, there's zero pressure. It's going to go if it's right for them. And if not, cool. Hey, we'll move on.
And we're both parents in B2B. Yeah.
Yep.
That seems to be very consistent with a lot of top performance, because when you're raised in that, they think like salespeople because they are. And there's a lot of osmosis going on there.
And it comes back again to nurture. I think it was all learned, and I have a solid foundation. My dad sold large institutional accounts for a large investment manager. So he was flying around the country in my formative years, closing big multi-million-dollar deals. And my mother was a cold caller and still is, actually. She's still cold calling. So
yeah. And what was the motivation to get into leadership versus staying an individual contributor?
It's a great question. And it's another one that I find myself speaking about a lot with AEs. And this topic has been beaten to death with AEs, but of course it's a very different gig. And there's the old aphorism, what do you get when you promote your best performer? Of course, you get a garbage manager and you lose your best performer. And it's this idea that most AEs see that as a continuation of the profession and prestige and a title and respect. And meanwhile, as you know, as a leader, half the time we're like, man, I should just be selling again because I'm really, really good at this. And man, I'd have so much less stress and I'd be making more money probably. So I think though, this is one of those things. And again, it comes back to probably being learned. I do have a deep belief that you should find your alignment and what works for you and what you have a natural inclination for and a love of. I legitimately love the leadership aspect of nurturing the spark within someone else and enabling someone else to perform better than they would have on their own. And I think that's a unifying trait that all leaders have to have in sales is that, again, I get to be selfishly unselfish because if you hit or exceed your number, I'm serving my own ends, but I am also serving you. It doesn't matter which one's first. It really doesn't. That's a chicken or egg conversation. I could be helping you because I want to hit my number, or I could be helping you because I want to help you. But any way around it, we're going to get there together.
And how did you make the internal trade-off between income and helping?
So I do believe that when done well, that's a very slight difference. It is. I mean, look, at the apex of the career, if we're going to go in and say, okay, I'm going to become a stellar outside rep in big enterprise and make 7 figures, fine. My natural tendencies, I know, do not align with the big outside rep deal. I've long been an inside guy and a process and emotion guy at scale. And I know where I align with, and that's not the profile of the guy going out and making $10 million a year with Oracle, that one sales guy who's the top of the top, and Larry Ellison says, come over and we'll smoke cigars together and you're amazing and here's your bonus for $3 million. That's not me. We all know a guy like that who just has the ability to maintain that type of role and impetus. So for me, I think that you're an AE, you go up the chain, you have to have recognizance that you are actually not even taking a step back, you're going off the track and you're going
It's a
on a new
different track.
track.
Yeah.
It is. And so a lot of them will say, okay, I'm taking a step back. No, you're rebooting and you're leveraging the knowledge and experience that you've garnered by being good at what you did, but you are starting over. Doesn't matter that your title is manager now. You're brand new. You are going to make less the first couple of years than you did as a stellar AE. It's just a fact of life. You have to love it and have a drive for it. And I stumbled into it, to be frank, in that I started my professional B2B career in the heyday of the mortgage boom, which was, here's a phone book, kid, here's some leads. And then I said B2B, really, it was B2C, but we had a B2B element, whatever. That was my first real professional non-retail job. So that really was, here's a phone, you're not allowed to have a computer because that would be a distraction. Make your 700 cold calls a day, and if it works, we'll pay you a whole lot of money. If not, here's your steak knives.
Yeah.
And it was amazing, and I loved it. And I had some ideas around the business that the owners of the company I worked for did not love. They wanted to do their thing. They were very happy doing what they were doing. They had Porsche turbos and they were good with that, and that was good enough. And I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to start my own company because that's the only way I can truly do what I think is right. And I don't think I did it necessarily for fully the right reasons, in that I'm incredibly glad I did, but I did it with youthful arrogance that says my way is the right way, and railing against this concept of CEO as architect of their own company. Meanwhile, I think later in life, and this is the benefit of hindsight, of course, especially I'm a VP of sales reporting to a CEO. That CEO's vision is what we need to fold in with. And the minute you can't, you should no longer be at this company. So that quote from Elon a couple of weeks ago was really divisive for many people. I have no qualms with that quote. It said, of course, and I think you know the one I'm talking about, which was, hey, if you agree with what I say, I expect it to be done or you're fired. If you disagree, tell me you disagree and we can talk about it. That is, I think that's abrasive to some sensibilities, but I don't have any qualms with that because we're not living in a little pocket democracy. What we are living in is an autocratic leadership form with every CEO. And I think you need to acknowledge and understand that your role is to be the hand of the king. You're assuaging and you're guiding and you're nudging. But when they say no, you do, you do. Otherwise, don't.
Well, it also, let's get rid of the smiling and nodding, where like, yeah, I agree with you, but I really don't. And I'm going to go away and do what I want anyway.
Exactly, which is ruinous for a company.
In
And
sales.
it is ruinous. And of course, that is pervasive at the AE level, because of course, when you're talking about a junior AE, they're young and they've got their vim and vigor that says, I know the way. And who are you? You're not selling. I know the right way to do it. So yeah, sure. Okay. You last sold 10 years ago. Sure.
Yeah, it's a whole new world.
And then the center cannot hold.
And how do you balance this coaching and developing people with the administrative stuff that seems to have taken over sales leadership?
It has in I think we bear the responsibility of making them one and the same, and really making that quasi akin to the SDLC, in that the admin and leadership needs to be an outcome of productive coaching. And if we have productive coaching and people are doing the right things, the admin and leadership is even easier. So I really do try to visualize that as a continuous improvement cycle where one is feeding the other. If they're two disparate things, you'll implode because you're trying to do everything. If you view them as very intimately connected and driving each other, I think it's the only way to look at it and make them harmonious.
And what do you typically see reps doing wrong when you're coaching them?
So I presently work in an interesting environment, and this is a whole subtopic unto itself. I work in an anti-PLG SaaS company, and that is as bucking the trend as it could be, but I've become quite the proponent of it. And I could go on for hours about this topic now. I think PLG is being done badly in many places. I think for many products, PLG, for anyone listening that isn't aware, PLG was generally coined by OpenView partners as product-led growth, which is that the salesperson is secondary to the virtue of the product itself. And the role of the salesperson is to guide and nurture once the buyer has said, I want your product because I've tried it. Well, if I did that in my current gig, it would implode because that's not what we do. So we have a very sales forward approach whereby our software product itself is only one component of what it is that we're actually offering to the buyer. In that it's more akin to offering a partnership that they do actually have to come out of pocket with. So if we did PLG, it would never fly. And when we do, and buyers have learned to expect that, so they try and ask for it even when it's not what they want. It's, oh, just give me a trial and we'll figure it out. No, you're not actually going to figure it out.
No.
You're not.
So how do you sell around that? Because I've seen that a lot today.
So the selling around it for us is being slightly prescriptive. When I say slightly, I mean very, in that there is a way to evaluate this thing that is not necessarily the way you expect. You're not going to have an epiphany by playing and poking around with the product. We're going to still be very, very secondary to your needs and where your business needs to go. But I'm going to show you a different mechanism of evaluation. And one of the ways in which we're doing it is we're starting to actually say no to demo requests. And we're saying, okay, we'll even explain this to you in the beginning. We're removing our sales engineer from the process until about 3 meetings in is one way that we're thinking it. And we're forcing it. And we're saying, look, the demo is great. This will work for you. It'll be fine. And it has for 200 other clients. And we'll show you these case studies. It's great. It's good enough. But what we really need to make sense of is this going to enable you to achieve where you want to be? We've got to work through where you want to be, where you are, and let's make sure the dots align. If the stars are shining here and everything is good, don't worry. You can have your POC. You can have your trial, but it's not going to show you that this whole mechanism is actually going to work. We need to unpack where you are, show you our current partners' experiences, and then you can make a good determination. And if you make the determination and you tell me this does make sense for you, we'll give you everything you need, but we can't do it out of order.
And what do you run into on the customer side?
Willful obstinance. Of course.
Well, everybody thinks they know everything and they can evaluate and they know what the future holds.
Of course. Absolutely. So I think that if you are doing exec level selling, this does resonate because working with an exec, they say, sure, okay, this makes sense. Let's talk about this top line. I had an old manager who became a dear friend and a mentor throughout my entire career. And I would crack up whenever he would meet with a CEO. I worked for him very early in my career. He was a CRO. And we would absolutely find this the height of hilarity when we would bring him in a big deal to meet with the C-level exec. He would practically pull out a cocktail napkin, draw on it in crayon and say, your stuff broken, my stuff fixed, let's go. And it would magically align because that's what the CEOs want. They do want a distillation that says, here, this is, I know where you are because I understand the environment. And this segues off into another interesting point of the state of modern sales. And it's one that I find confounding right now. And it's one that I think is also critical. We are worthless as brochureware as salespeople. If we're going to come in and just reiterate the feature function and what the product does, you're useless. That was useless before COVID. Post-COVID, it's less than useless in that you're now actively wasting someone's time. And this is now negative vibes you're putting out there in your sales universe. We do need to actually not just unearth value, we need to provide the value. We need to be the one actually synthesizing, even before we speak with them, what this is going to do for them and presenting a case. And exactly as you say, it's a common theme with you in that content marketing is dead. They should be willing to pay for this content if it's worth anything. Well, I would take that a step further. And I would say, That's the same thing as the salesperson. If they weren't willing to actually say, you know what, this was a great meeting, where do we send the check? It wasn't worth having that meeting, because they could have gone on our website and understood it better than we do.
Yeah, because there's the school of like, I'm so enjoyable to talk to. And then there's like, I know the most about the product.
All right.
It's like, no, I know most about your business,
It's
what
so
you're
funny.
up against.
It's so funny. So I saw Keenan speak recently, and Keenan drew this matrix. He was like, all right, guys, who's a relationship seller? He asked the audience. And this guy raises his hand. He's like, you're doing it wrong. Get out. And while I may not be to that extreme, I agree with his underlying principle, which is he said, okay, guys, let's talk about things. Okay. If a buyer can't stand you and they love your product and what it's going to do for them, are they going to buy? Yeah, probably. If they love you and they can't stand your product and what it does for them, are they going to buy? Nope. He's like, so guys, why is this relationship taking so much time and energy on your part when it does absolutely nothing for your buyer, except shows them that you're trying to exist in this artifice? And I'm paraphrasing here, of course, with my own synthesis, but now you're existing in this artifice that says, you know, we're not going to be friends, but I'm going to pretend to make friends because I think that you think that if we're friends, you may buy something from me. Your buyer knows what's going on.
Well, you know, I think he's at the other end in a transactional sale.
Yeah, of course.
But they got to want to talk to you.
Exactly. This is Maslow's hierarchy, in that it is a table stakes that says, okay, they need to make this journey going along with me a pleasant experience that is not negative. If it's negative, they're not going to do business. And that's where I disagree with Keenan, of course. Yes, he's being deliberately shock value to make a point. But by the same token, the value of what they are receiving is far more important than you knowing where their kid went to college and talking about how you went there too. They don't care. And one thing that I'm always guiding reps to is the rapport building part that is formally part of every single sales call and best practice. Well, yeah, it's kind of necessary and it's table stakes and fine. But unless we can transform that into something that actually demonstrates to the prospect that, number one, I've done my research. Number two, I've customized this entire approach and I've made it for you. And I've unearthed these pieces of information that instead of me asking you, I've already gone ahead and synthesized something, and I'm going to demonstrate that for you. And this, therefore, is going to be a very good use of your time. And that, of course, is the ultimate goal, is time arbitrage of the sales rep. We're meeting for half an hour. You're getting 8 hours worth of value.
I think that's great, but how do you get reps, or how do you find reps that can do that?
I'm going to, there's a couple of things. Again, I'm going to agree with you very, very vehemently on some of the things that you've said, which is background, experience, and it can be very non-traditional. If you have dealt with individuals that are attempting to exchange money for services, and you've been the one that's standing between them, you've got a good sense of what this is. That could be waiting tables, that could be bartending, that could be working retail, that could be almost anything where you've dealt with a lot of people that are giving you money and they expect something in return. Sales is sales, of course. And I think a lot of those concepts very much transfer. So where I struggle with AEs and new ones is those that have all the desire, but none of the experience. It's just a really, really long learning curve. And I think a lot of companies get fooled by strong personality, strong academic record, strong everything, and the paper rep that is eloquent and can come into the interview and knows everything on paper. They make it through a whole lot of interview processes. They do. But then in the real world, they don't understand that ultimate responsibility of the rep because they've been trained in sales by a generation of terrible salespeople that have sold to them. So of course, these are the reps that come in and think that if they are the best living brochure in the world, people will buy their stuff. And of course, we know how that goes.
And in your market, is it active pain? Is there a particular problem that they've already put a name to that they're trying to solve? Or is it latent pain where it's like, They
There's
haven't put a name to it and they really don't want to think about it, but they do feel it.
my current market is a unique one. So it's hard for me to draw corollaries between what we're up to in my company and what's happening out in the world, except to say that we sell to a unique audience. We sell to managed service providers, and managed service providers have no budget. There are no dollars for tools. There's nothing. This is all about working through them in a B2B2B context. And that is, again, a much different dynamic of a sale, because there is no investment to solve for a challenge. There is only a vehicle to get to more revenue for them. So it's again, a bit of a different dynamic in that it's not, oh, this investment fixes this problem. It's, oh, I spend 50, I make back 200. Well, we can consider this. So it's a little bit of a different dynamic and more of a partnership effort. So in my current gig, but it does come back to the same things, which is that this needs to be customer first. And one concept I always advise is, and I think, again, this is pervasive now in salespeople, especially the untrained, but it also does show up in the trained. How often do you hear salespeople make themselves and their company the subject of the entire meeting? And it makes me want to rip my hair out, what little is left of it from being in this profession for too long. So it is often, here's what we do. Oh, I'd love to do this. Oh, I think that's a great idea. I think my company, we do, I do. And oh, nothing makes me cringe more than that. We need to become invisible. We are moderating a debate between value and your prospect, and the pain of change and the pain of inaction. And as Challenger says, of course, the pain of doing nothing. And that's what we're there to do, is to proffer guidance. And we can't, and we'll never be an impartial observer. We can't. We're being given a paycheck by a company that says, you need to get people to adopt my stuff. So we can never truly say, look, it doesn't matter to me if you do it or not. It does. And they know it does. And that's okay. We're going to have some inherent bias towards the positive. But what we should have is the worked through case that says, I've done the math already. I know it's going to be positive for you. This decision is your decision. You're going to look at it and evaluate if it's the right time, but I'm going to show you all of the pieces that I've put together vis-a-vis how others like you have done it. And I'm going to help you walk to this determination. And of course, my evidence is going to support the idea that they should do it, but it also does have to support that idea that they should do it.
And I got to imagine the hardest part is keeping the deal moving.
Absolutely.
Because you get excitement, you get interest and curiosity, but no urgency.
Exactly. And there's a lot of interesting dynamics at play in this post-COVID world. All urgency is artificial. All of it is. I think Lemkin has written about this ad nauseum. Like, our urgency is always artificial, but the best AEs somehow magically do the arcane and use probably a lot of the concepts that we've been speaking about to create urgency. But that's not urgency from us that's artificial or a financial incentive. No, it is, let's get rolling so you can see this. And then here's what this is going to impact. And those level 2 value implications are absolutely critical in a very genuine way that says, hey, we've gone over this, and here's what this is going to affect and change. And here's the butterfly effect for you. So the time is now, and here's why.
Right. And to baby step them along the way.
Exactly. Right. It's the small commitments. We're going back to old solution sales. I do this, you do this. Now look, here's the checklist.
Well, yeah, but you got to kind of lead it.
Yes, you do.
Right. That's our job. It's not their job to buy.
Exactly. It is our job to show them. Their job is to decide whether or not it's good for them. That is their only job.
Right. And clearly it is. It's just, where is it on the pile of great ideas?
Exactly. Exactly.
And how can you tell when you've got a great rep before they crush a big deal?
It's the great debate, of course. So I've always likened it to, there is a factor X. And the factor X is, in many reps, I would say like me, of course, and probably like you, I want my shiny object and I'm going to do and be the best at my craft because we're just insatiable. It's what we are. I had my Porsche and I got rid of my Porsche because I want a Ferrari. When I get my Ferrari, I'll want a Bugatti. When I get a Bugatti, I'll want a private jet. And I think that's a good trait in a rep. It doesn't have to manifest in the material object, but it is always wanting more and never settling and sitting. The rep, the minute they stop working is the minute they start falling into the peak and valley cycle, because we need to go no matter what height we've achieved. There's that movie that just came out on Netflix and it's on my watch list, but I haven't watched it yet. There's the mountaineer that wanted to break the record of doing, it was 8 months to do, I think, the top 8 peaks. Maybe it was, there was something like, or it was 8 years. He did it in something insane like 8 weeks, right? And it's that type of energy applied to sales that says, I simply cannot stop. And sure, that's hard to gauge and that's hard to necessarily do in a 2-week interview cycle. But you can tell the rep that is going to do everything necessary to ensure that this lines up. And it is, okay, I'm not going to slack on any piece because I understand the holistic importance of all of this. You need my reporting? No problem. I'm going to do my reporting. I'm going to win this deal, and here's what I understand why. And I think factor B for me is the best reps in the world are effectively invisible. They are orchestrators of available resources. That's what they do. I find the best reps in the world don't even necessarily have to come up with all that much, but they know where everything is and what everything is, and they've got this map in their head of everything that's available to them, and they know how to correlate. And it is, okay, on this deal, I need to grab in their CTO. Our CTO has done this before on this past deal. I'm going to get them to come in. I don't need to take the weight of the world on my shoulders, but I do need to guide every single piece of this and own every single piece of this opportunity. The mediocre rep thinks that some of these pieces will get done of their own volition.
Naturally.
Exactly. And that the buyer is going to say, oh, you know what? I'm going to make sure my CEO understands that this is really important. Sure.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll happen.
Cool. Hey, I really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
Sure. On LinkedIn, of course, tends to be my primary social hub. So my company that I work for is Electronique, and we are the only robotic process automation vendor that offers a solution only for managed service providers. So it is an amazing space right now. It is one of the few spaces I have ever found, and actually the only one I've ever personally found, where we have an opportunity to get in on the next big thing before it's too late. In my career, I've always chased the dragon, and I've always been behind one of the market leaders and never actually had it be worthwhile. RPA is in this really interesting pause point where it hasn't garnered mass adoption yet, but it is going to. And it's an amazing space to be in. I've now overseen this ride from being employee 1 in the United States about a year ago. We're now about 180 employees and we have about 60 some odd in sales. So it's been a bonkers breakneck ride.